Hi, I'm Joe, and I'm the DM. We're going through these series of recaps, or I call them journals, for the games that we've been having. Um, our most recent game was this last Tuesday, so just excited to kind of put it down on video and let everybody know what happened. The game is awesome in that everyone is collaboratively working together to build a story. And yeah, the stories are not necessarily always epic, but they're unpredictable, and you never know which way they're going to go. And that's what I love about it. Later on this video, I'm going to, after I get done telling the story, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I guess I'll call the DM perspective of the story. That's, I think, my favorite part of the story is, after doing dungeon mastering for 20 plus years, is that you never know. You know, you're writing the story, but that's not really true. The players are writing the story, and you might be providing some framework for that, but you don't know how the story is going to end. And as a DM, as you watch the story play out, that's a fun perspective, and I hope everybody gets a chance to do that someday. So, where are we at? The last time we talked, that the characters had gone into a dungeon of sorts. They were actually in town, in the town of Far Plains, and they discovered a hole that a bunch of kobolds had come out and staged a raid against the town. Well, of course, the characters had managed to thwart that raid and kill all the kobolds, but then when they investigated, it's like there's a hole there, and the kobolds came out of the hole. So they had gone down and investigated, and it had been a that had been a good game. They encountered some rust monsters in a box, and they'd encountered some a leshy, and they'd encountered a black wall that they couldn't figure out. They didn't have the courage or the ability to go into that black wall, but there was a cone of fire that came out and scorched them. So that was a big question mark. Lots of things happened at that game. That was a good game. Previous video. So this game we picked up, they're still in there because we had to stop, unfortunately. You know, that's the way it is. Just run out of time, right? 2 weeks passed, and now we're back to, okay, what are you going to do now? This is great. I love starting that game that way. It's like, what are you going to do now? As long as the players are organized enough not to take too long deciding that. In this case, they weren't. Not so much. So there was a tremendous amount of work being done. So they're in this cavern, which is under the town, and trying to decide what to do next. They pretty quickly decided that because of their current state of being chewed up, low hit points, I think one of the characters, and this is a 5th level party, I think it was Crumb, the thief, was sitting at something like 8 hit points, so not good. They had to work on healing and that sort of thing. So they pretty quickly decided not going to further explore or try again with the black wall that's spouting fire. And they quickly decided, okay, we're going to exit at least temporarily. But then they ensued a tremendous amount of discussion and preparation about what then, because they felt a responsibility. And this is the fun thing about the game. When you get the characters that are invested enough, they feel responsibility. So they felt a responsibility to the town to not, what if there's more kobolds that will somehow come out of this cavern? Or these bad things that we ran into, what if they come out and, decimate the townspeople? So they wanted to do something. They stayed the night in the building where the cavern comes out of. Stayed the night there, the 5 of them. And just to recap real quick who that is, that's Bolgi the cleric, it's Caddis the fighter, it's Crumb the thief, and then they have Darv Dustmaster. Darv's the newest character. He's only 2nd level, the rest of them are 5th. And Darv is an alchemist, that's right. And then, let's see, who am I forgetting? Kor. Kor is a champion, so orc champion. The interesting thing was they spent a tremendous amount of time deciding, what do we do with this hole? They found some scraps of wood they could put over the top of it so that if something were to come out, it might have to disturb the wood and they'd know about it. But then they also decided to put a warning system up. So must have been a good 15 minutes deciding, like, okay, we're going to cut the kobolds' heads off, and should we roll those in the hole? That would be a good deterrent. If something were to come up, they would see the kobold heads, and they would no doubt be intimidated by that, I guess. And then or maybe it's better to take the kobolds' heads, cut them off, and then put them on a pike, spikes, and then put the spikes with the heads around the hole. So if something comes out of the hole, it's going to look out and see the kobold heads on the spikes. Maybe so. They went around quite a while trying to decide what to do with this, and some of the players began to get frustrated because they decided, or they suspected, it didn't matter whether the kobold heads were rolled into the hole or on pikes, sticks around the hole, or what. In the town, they first of all they went and they wanted to do some warnings. So they went and they warned they tried to warn the government of the town that, hey, there's this cavern and there's scary stuff under there. You should do something about that. Then they quickly realized, that Far Plains government is broken right now. It's been taken over by a malignant force. In this case, it is Maka Slider. He is a Naga. He's not actually there right now, but his forces have been kind of running the place and displacing the legitimate government. So they tried that. The government doesn't work, so they did the next best thing, and they went to a tavern and tried to talk to them. And that worked out well. So they met the tavern master, the barkeep, and asked him, who would care about such a thing? And he directed them to a gentleman sitting in the corner. So the guy in the corner turns out to be Barth, who is someone that they talked to and realized Barth actually seems to have some knowledge of things to do with armed men. So what they decided to do is pool their resources and go ahead and have Barth lead a militia. And with that, they felt, okay, things are good enough. We've set the town up. They should be as safe as we can make them. We can finally leave town. So on the way out of town, they bump into somebody. They're just kind of getting ready to go. They haven't actually left town. And they walk by a female dwarf. She's going the other way, and they're going towards the outskirts of town. And she stops in her tracks and turns around and says, "Bulgy?" So Bulgy is taken back by this. Who's this female dwarf that knows my name? He turns around, and turns out he does recognize her. Her name is Takara, and she's a person out of Bulgy's past. So part of Bulgy's background is as a laborer, and so when he was doing this work back in his homeland before he became a cleric adventurer, Bulgy was working in a team with Takara. She was one of the other of many people that were a team of miners, and they all worked for the same foreman. So Bulgy is able to talk with Takara, and he learns the story there. Why is Takara there? Because this is not the area where he was on that laborer group with Takara. But it turns out Takara is there with many other actually dwarves. And actually that same foreman, who is kind of a loved leader, is there with them. Takara is a little bit of an airhead, so she's kind of babbling, but she lets them know that they're actually there pursuing Maka Slider because there's a reward that they've been offered to go get Maka Slider. So Takara lets them know that they are at Fair Plains because that's where they think Maka is. And so it's clear that her information is out of date. And ultimately what they ended up doing for Takara, they ended up not correcting her about Maka's location. They didn't give that away. But they did, and I guess this is just a gift, they gave her and her group, the foreman and the other dwarves, specific information about the caverns that they had decided to leave alone. And again, that was a big point of the game where the players went, there was a lot of discussion about how much information do we give them. So finally, that was resolved. They decided to tell them pretty much everything they knew about the caverns, and good luck, be careful, and go take care of the cavern if you wish. So that was done, and they had decided there was a couple of different places they could go. They could go to the nearest town, which is the town of Monta, where they had some contacts there and wanted to follow up on a few things. Or they could go directly to where they were told that Maka Slider was building his army. And so they made the decision, didn't take long, we're going to go straight to Maka. We're going to take care of this guy, figure out if we can fix this once and for all. So off they went and headed off to showdown with Maka. It was a bit of a journey, though, so they did set themselves up with some horses. The horses that were available they could get were not war horses, and of course war horses are expensive too. They got riding horses, so that's good. So they were moving a lot faster, and it was several days later that they had their first encounter on the way. And it was something like this. So as they're riding on their riding horses, they're riding through an area that is, they're basically using a dry riverbank for a road. And I can even show you the map. It's something like this. So they're using the dry riverbank as a road, and there's deep bushes on both sides of this, but no really tall trees or anything. And there's some big rocks, boulder-sized rocks that are strewn around. And it's a bright, sunny day. And as they're riding, they're noticing, it's a constant thing, of course, there's rabbits, and there's a deer here and there's butterflies, and there's all these things, just, it's nature as they're moving through. And they notice suddenly that all these elements of nature, the rabbits and the squirrels, suddenly freeze and disappear, and it becomes quiet. So they, of course, immediately are doing perception checks, trying to see what is going on, and they, 2 of the 5 did make a perception check, and they were able to spot, coming out of the bright sun and using the sun as cover, were big flyers coming in. Action ensued. Turns out what's coming out of the sun is 3 griffins. Griffins, it turns out, they have a special ability, which is a strafe ability, that allows them essentially to fly and take 2 attacks in the middle of their move. And that's pretty awesome for the griffin anyway, in the scheme of things for actions, because in that situation, if they're able to do that, and it takes some special situations for them to do that, it means that they can fly, attack, and continue that fly movement. So unless that creature has an attack of opportunity, and right now only Caddis has an attack of opportunity, then you don't get an attack on this thing. It was quickly evident that they were kind of a little bit sitting ducks out in the middle of the open, and there were these boulders around. So you've got Caddis that had moved off into some cover from the rocks, moved away from the group. And there was immediately this good-natured ribbing that happened amongst the players. It was like, wait a minute, wasn't it Caddis that had come up with the whole idea that we needed to make sure that we didn't scatter when there was difficulty, but in fact that we would stay together so that we could watch each other's back and not be flanked and this sort of thing. So there was a little bit of tension in the group. Part of the interesting dynamic of this battle was the horses. So as I mentioned, they were on riding horses, and riding horses are different than war horses. They're not trained for battle. And so the way I decided to handle that is that we did a check. What I did is I had them do a athletics check to see about how well they dismounted the horse. And it wasn't terribly difficult. I checked to see the horse's reaction, and if the horse's reaction was not over the top, completely freaking out, then it was an 18 check. So, and these are 5th levelers, so shouldn't be too hard. But unfortunately, two of the characters did fail that check, and so we just called that a yes, you use your action to dismount, but now you are not standing next to the horse, you are sitting on the ground next to the horse. and it just used an extra action. The fun part was one of the characters, it was Core, he rolled his check to get off of the horse, and for one thing his horse was more calm, and for another thing he rolled a wonderful check on his athletics check, and he critically succeeded on that check.
Something I'm good at. Let's do it.
You do a graceful backflip off of your horse.
Catching your sword in midair.
That's right.
Stepping off your pony, your sword.
Toss my sword out of the sheath into the air, flip back, grab it, and my shield ready. Okay. All right, so I'm going to step back and I guess.
That was a good critical success for him, and then at that point pretty much everybody was off the horses, and the battle continued from there. But Caddis was able to get a critical success with her weapon on that Griffin, and we invoked one of the tables that I have, one of the homebrew tables, which is a critical hit table, and what that ended up doing is showing that Caddis had scored a head hit on this Griffin and had stunned it. So she did double damage too. So she had done a pretty good chunk of damage, and the Griffin was now standing, basically shaking its head for 4 actions. So that was fun to watch. Then the Caddis and then a couple of other Darv and maybe it was Core all basically converged on this Griffin and were able to quickly take it out. Not that segment, but the next round. So that was a good high point in the battle. And then the other 2 Griffins are circling around. They're coming in for their other attacks. There's been a few hits on them, but they're still in pretty good shape. They are coming down, and we're resetting for the next round, and out of time. Out of time. So that means that this has to pick up again in the next game that we have, in the next video too, because I don't know how it's ended. As I said, this is an ongoing story. They should be able to get past this and continue on to head towards the area where Maka is supposedly building an army of some sort of slimy creatures. So that's going to be more progress towards that, at least, will be happening in 2 weeks. So when I put this game together, I had made the cavern underneath the town, and I did that because I wanted a dungeon. You know, we've been running overworlds forever, and dungeons in Pathfinder, and in fact for years, and even 3.5, they haven't been like dungeons used to be in old D&D. These vast labyrinths of stacks of rooms and rooms and rooms and levels, which kind of miss. They didn't make any sense back then when we did them, but I still kind of miss them. So I was really wanting a dungeon. So I built this cavern underneath the town. And I had to build it on a whim because to me, originally, the kobolds were coming out of this hole in the ground. And for the encounter we did a couple weeks ago. And then as we were packing up and everybody was, signing off of Roll20 where we play Pathfinder, there were some comments about, we're going to have to check out that hole and make sure that there's no more kobolds in there. And so I thought about that as we were shutting down. That would be disappointing if it was just the way I had it in my mind, which was, this is just a tunnel that these kobolds had dug to tunnel into the town and pop up and raid the town. So it'd be more interesting if there was something more down there. So I built this cavern, and I think some good stuff in there. I liked the rust monsters in the box, with the box being guarded by an imp, an imp that is mischievous. That was good, and there was some other good stuff in there. And but they decided not to check out all the remaining pieces of that, and that's so disappointing. That happens as a DM, you go to the trouble to create these things, but hey, we build the boundaries of the story, we build the framework for the story, I guess is the right way to say it, but we don't decide how it goes. So they decided not to investigate the black wall that had the fire coming out of it. And I thought that would be so compelling that there's no way they could not check it out to figure out what is that. And what is it? Well, should I reveal that? Sure, why not? They've decided not to go back there, right? So the black wall is just the side of a permanent darkness spell, basically, which is a globe. And so they're seeing the wall of darkness that is a high enough level that a light spell doesn't dissipate it. So they could walk into it, it would just be ultimately dark, and of course they could walk through this globe and go out the other side. Out the other side was quite a bit of good stuff, treasure and whatnot, guarded by a couple of hellhounds. So the hellhounds live there, they're familiar with the darkness, they know how it works, they can walk through it, and they have good perception, scent, and hearing, like any hound would. So when they hear something coming and smell that it's close to them, they can stand in the darkness and breathe out the fire. So that's what was going on there. And it would have been fun if they would have taken that on. I was thinking it would have been cool to have a battle that is entirely in darkness. And the thing is, the hellhounds can't see in a darkness spell either, so everybody would have had the same disadvantage until they happen to stumble out beyond the outer edge of that darkness one way or the other. So anyway, didn't happen, and I just have to live with that, right? So, because to somehow make them go there would have been what they call railroading, right? So that's done. I'll have to wad up that little module and move on. And finally, just the Griffins. What was from the DM side of that? Always aerial counters are going to be great. They require a lot of space. The map I ended up using for that, which I showed on the last one, I can show again. I ended up having to change the grid layout on that. And I get these maps from kind people on places like Reddit that share their work, because I do not have that talent, and that's just not where I want to invest my time. Though, wow, I have incredible respect. This map, I'll put up the credit. I'll look up who put it out there and put the credit up here in the video, because they were kind enough to share it. And so anyway, that map came, unfortunately, with a grid on it. And I needed to have vast space, because flyers are going back and forth and taking up a lot of space when you're running a flyer encounter. So I ended up just superimposing a secondary grid onto that, basically putting 4 squares in every square. So taking a 5 by 5 square and interpreting it as 10 by 10. And I just had to let the players know, hey, if you zoom in, you'll see there's a secondary set of grids there. And worked fine. I really liked the Griffin encounter, and people really got into it. In fact, it was amazing. The players were so energized by this encounter, and I'm kind of wondering, what was it about it that got him? I mean, one guy actually, when he missed, he jumped up from the table, and because he was so tense and frustrated from missing his attack.
So it'd be really good if I could actually get a critical.
Oh my god. Somebody help God.
What did I do to you?
Oh, now you're starting to feel my pain after I broke like 3
Oh my
weapons
God.
in a row.
Pulling a core.
That's what it's about, right? Isn't that a great game when the players are that energized or excited? And I mean, pretty good too, considering, we're in the middle of COVID right now, and so this is all being done remotely. Roll20, we're not even there with each other, but still, there was a great energy in this Griffin battle, and I don't think there was probably the threat of death. That always, of course, makes the energy higher. But I think it was just a fun battle. It was aerial, and there was a lot going on. There was these 3 Griffins circling, and everyone's jumping off the horses, and a lot of moving parts. We aren't done with the Griffins, as I said. That's frustrating. but it allows me to know that we're going to have some Griffin battles, so that'll use up some of our game time next time to wrap that up. And then I have to be ready for what's next. And there's a certain amount of random to that, whether they'll run into 1 or 2 encounters, maybe 0, before they get to Maka Sliders territory. But I've also got to get Maka Sliders territory, which I can't divulge that yet, what that is, but that's got to be ready for their, at least to come in and begin experiencing that. So it's good stuff. The game's rolling along nice, and we've got a good group that is working well together. We have 5 people. Unfortunately, they're all guys. I wish we had a better diversity there, but we have 5 guys that are, for the most part, everyone is showing up to every game. So thanks for hanging around to the end of this thing, and I'll try to keep cranking these out if people are still watching them. So otherwise, hope you're having fun with your games. And boy, if you've got any questions or comments, that would energize me to see those in the YouTube stuff down below. So appreciate that, or at least say like, or if you don't like it, don't say like. All right. So anyway, thanks for watching.